Hi everyone, my name is Chris, and in this next video I wanted to draw a distinction between two concepts which I think I conflated in my previous two videos, which you can find in the description below. I think I failed to draw enough of a distinction between self-doubt and doubting in the sense of critical thinking, so that's what we'll concentrate on today. The goal of this video will be to realize that we should be self-doubting less, but thinking critically much more. Before we go any further, I just want to talk about doubt generally, both of these types of doubt together. I think doubt serves as some kind of barrier to maybe learning or action, and the reason why we need such a barrier is because fundamentally our knowledge of the world is imperfect and it's prediction based. Within pretty much any discipline, we can't ever have all of the information, all of the facts in order to create certainty. Therefore, the kind of holes that are left, we must fill in with theories and with predictions about them. That means that we're not really ever living in some kind of objectivity. We can't ever be 100% sure of what we know. So we must have some kind of control system to stop us from making rash decisions. And I think that is doubt. I think the greatest difference between the two types of doubts that we're about to discuss is that they serve as barriers in different directions. Self-doubt is going to be a border that we have to cross when going from ourselves to the outside, and doubting or thinking critically about things is a border that the outside is going to have to cross when coming to us. That will make more sense as we go on. Now you'll notice I still haven't defined either self-doubt or doubting in the sense of critical thinking. So before we do go on, it is really important to have a concrete definition of what we're discussing, just so that everyone is on the same page. For me, self-doubt is a fundamental disbelief regarding the self for inconsequential things. Now, I don't mean inconsequential in the sense of things that are unimportant, because I think the place where self-doubt predominantly exists is for very important things like a job application, a test, asking someone out on a date. These aren't inconsequential things. What I mean by inconsequential is I think that these things are inconsequential for the greater external consciousness, if you will. They're really only things that are important to us. Critical thinking, on the other hand, applies to things which are much more shared, to knowledge which exists not only for ourselves. These are things like political elections or major global phenomena like global warming. It's into these spheres that we must really proceed with caution and think critically. As I've said, I think doubt serves as this kind of barrier or a corroborative method, but coming back to self-doubt for a moment, if we look at it historically or evolutionarily, we can see that our species lives in groups. We depend on others and others depend on us. I think self-doubt arose to allow us to better integrate ourselves with others. We still see that today. If we do something completely crazy, no one's really going to like us. We need friends, and we needed friends in our past to survive. And this self-doubt allows us to create and maintain those friendships without totally wrecking them. Social media is now starting to especially play into this realm because we're becoming very connected, and it's very easy to see what others are doing and how they're reacting to what we're doing. But could it be that social media is playing a bit too much into this and making us doubt ourselves too much? Maybe because what we see online is just so perfect and so unattainable for us, we start to feel very small and hollow and forget that the majority of what we see online regards these inconsequential things, inconsequential in the way I defined earlier. We shouldn't really be too worried about that. But that's easier said than done, so I wanted to share some things which helped me and have helped me in the past not to self-doubt so much and just kind of be able to carry on with my day. For example, yesterday I had just had a very weird day, I'm not really sure why. And one of the things I told myself to do is just to carry on doing any task that I could find in order not to let my mind wander and procrastinate and overthink. Another thing which really helps me is to remember that even if I do one of these inconsequential things and totally fail, I shouldn't just laugh at it, not take myself so seriously, and usually always try again. What often happens in this case is because you're more relaxed and not taking things so seriously, you're actually more confident, and the thing you're trying to do turns out a lot better because you're not so tense and not going so crazy. And also a final thing is, I don't really understand why you would not want to believe in yourself. For example, when going for a test or a job interview, that just doesn't make sense to me, because there's nothing that can go wrong from believing in yourself. I know all these things are really cliche, but we have a tremendous power when it comes to forecasting or creating some kind of reality for ourselves. The mindset that we have when we program ourselves for something that's about to happen usually determines how that thing will actually turn out. So it's better to program yourself optimistically. Often at the beginning, you're just going to have to force yourself to change your mindset about things. And what helps in this case is having some kind of visual and physical reminder of what you've decided to do. So of course, super cliched, but it works. Just try it. Just try it and see how it will change your life day to day. So now we get to the part of critical thinking, which my first video concentrates on. As I've said there, doubting and thinking critically about things is not taking the news or the posts or whatever else that you read or see for granted. Not accepting it straight away. We have to think critically about things which escape that which we know, which escape the circle of the things that we know, which I talked about in the previous video. Because if we don't have a solid foundation in something, we shouldn't accept knowledge and facts coming out of that area straight away. The question you always have to ask yourself is, does what I know already allow me to learn this straight away? Do I have enough of a background in this field to be lazy and to accept things quickly? In all of those inconsequential things which I said we shouldn't really worry about, the answer to that is usually yes. Hopefully we have prepared for that test, hopefully we have prepared for that job interview, and we do know how to speak to people, how to ask them questions, or how to ask them out on a date. So we shouldn't be pessimistic about our capabilities in these areas, in these inconsequential areas. But when it comes to critical thinking, it's not really a case of pessimism or optimism anymore. It's a case of maybe sanity or of manipulation and of influence, because of the fact that these things refer to a greater group. Again, social media comes into play here. It's made us very connected, it's made us doubt ourselves much, much more, and then it's bombarding us with all of these different opinions and facts and things which we are readily believing because we're not able and not confident enough to view them critically. Again, I can't stress this enough. You are allowed to disagree with unjustified claims and with unjustified opinions. So a good way to have different sources of information is to read different news channels, as I've said before. And actually I found a news app called Grand News, which I wanted to share with you today, which compares the articles of different news outlets regarding the same event. So here we can compare how different newspapers with different political biases report the same or similar news stories regarding the US election. So a left-wing newspaper is saying that Pence is being irresponsible for continuing to campaign without Trump and for having non-socially distant events. We can see the use of very emotional and an inflammatory language. Now we can see a more central newspaper giving more of a neutral outlook on this scenario. And finally, a right-wing newspaper which doesn't talk about Pence at all, but instead critiques Joe Biden. So now imagine if you only got your news from one of these sources, how skewed your perception of the world would be, how different you would believe things to be, how differently you might act because of that. This is powerful and this is dangerous, and that's why we should aim to have varied sources of information, just to avoid becoming the targets of such influence and of such manipulation. Now when I was thinking of making this video, I started thinking about whether there could be something different or in between self-doubt and critical thinking. And I think there is something which I'd like to call critical thinking of the self. I think it is different from self-doubt, because unlike in self-doubt where we are thinking and making decisions about the inconsequential things, we can think and make decisions about broader subjects and broader topics which stop being inconsequential. This is where we have to think critically about ourselves now. And again, it's not a matter of believing or not believing in yourself and about being pessimistic or optimistic about what your future holds. It's about protecting yourself from becoming prejudiced and becoming discriminatory and becoming very short-sighted and possibly naive. We too can start project things onto the outside and have them return to us and change how we behave. This can be a source of good, making us more confident in certain scenarios, but it can be also a source of bad, where we will yield to stereotyping and, as I said previously, to prejudice and discrimination. It's very hard to differentiate between self-doubt and critical thinking of the self, and I don't think I'll be able to provide a satisfactory answer for that here. The one thing which I can suggest, and which I've tried doing in the past before, is watching yourself very, very closely. Let's say for a week, for 3 days, even for a day. Watching every single action and motivation and thought that you have. Because when doing this is very interesting, you'll see that there are really weird things that go through your head, and that oftentimes we're not quite so benevolent as we might think. There's a devil in all of us, and we really have to watch and tame this potential evil that can jump out at any second. And there have been enough psychological experiments and historical experiments to show that we are capable of some truly horrendous things. Something which Jordan Peterson talks about quite often, and which has made quite an impression on me, is the idea that someone who is aware of their harm and aware of the evil that they can do, but able to control it and put it in check, is much better and healthier than someone who chooses to live in the ignorance of that, acting harmless. In order to have a better experience with the outside world, we must first really come to know ourselves inside and out, and that's something that we have to tackle every single day. Ultimately, it comes down to being able to justify deep down to yourself whether what you're doing is correct or not, whether what you're reading is correct or not, whether how you're behaving is the right way to proceed. There's a very sobering thought that I like from Nietzsche and from Camus, which is the thought of the eternal return or the eternal recurrence. An idea that our lives will be cyclical and will repeat themselves every single time, so that what we do now will be repeated forever and ever in the future. So we have to justify to ourselves whether we're living a life that we would be happy to repeat, living days that we would want to live again. That's pretty much it from me for today, and I hope that's made some sense. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.